My son's wife changed my prescription. By accident. The pharmacist whispered the truth. I nodded and kept taking the old pills. A month later, she understood why I was still sharp.
Hi, it's Grace. Quick question. If you caught your daughter-in-law messing with your meds, would you call the cops immediately or play it cool to catch her in the act? Tell me below. Today's story is about Dolores, and it's a terrifying look at what people will do for money.
So, Dolores, Brooke said, pouring me water instead of wine. For your medication, you know. Do you remember what we discussed last Tuesday about the insurance papers? She had that smile on her face. The one she practices in the bathroom mirror when she thinks no one's watching. I've seen her do it through the crack in the door. Lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. Eyes staying flat as day-old soda. She's been wearing that smile for a month now, waiting for me to stumble over my words, to ask the same question twice, to forget what day it is. I set down my fork. The meatloaf she'd made was dry as sawdust anyway. She always overcooks the meat and undercooks the vegetables, but nobody in this family has the nerve to tell her. You mean the papers where you listed yourself as my healthcare proxy without asking me? The ones dated March 3rd, notarized at the UPS store on Bleecker Street because you thought I wouldn't check? Those papers, Brooke. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. A piece of green bean fell onto the tablecloth. The white one she bought specifically because she knew I'd spill something on it eventually. She'd made such a fuss about that tablecloth. White is classic, Dolores. It's elegant. What she meant was, it shows every stain, and I'm keeping score. Kevin, my son, looked up from his plate like a man who'd just heard a gunshot in the distance. Ma, what are you... Or maybe, I continued, keeping my voice level, you meant the other papers, the ones in your purse. The draft of my new will, the one I never wrote, never signed, but somehow has my signature at the bottom. The color drained from Brooke's face so fast, I thought she might faint. In my 35 years as a cardiac nurse, I'd seen that exact shade of white plenty of times, usually right before someone's blood pressure crashed, usually right before bad news got worse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back a month, to the pharmacy on the corner of Maple and Fifth, where old Felix Delgado has been filling prescriptions since Nixon was sweating through his makeup on television. That's where this whole mess came into focus. That's where I stopped being a fool and started being something else entirely. The pharmacy smelled the way it always did, antiseptic and peppermint, with something underneath that reminded me of my grandmother's medicine cabinet back in Newark. Glass bottles and cotton balls and the faint bitter scent of pills crushed into powder. Felix was behind the counter, same as always, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead where they'd leave red marks by the end of his shift. He'd been wearing those same frames since 1989. I know because I was there when he bought them. I'd known Felix for 43 years. He and my late husband Sal used to play poker every Thursday night in our basement. Felix, Sal, Tommy Marchetti from the fire station, and old Joe Brennan, who'd been dead now for 15 years. They'd drink Sal's cheap beer and eat the sandwiches I made and argue about the Yankees until midnight. After Sal's heart gave out 3 years ago, Felix started setting my prescriptions aside so I wouldn't have to wait in line. Small kindness. But at 71, small kindnesses are the ones that matter most. Big gestures fade. Small things stick. That Tuesday, he looked at the prescription slip, then at me, then back at the slip. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with the corner of his white coat. His tell, I'd learned over the decades. He did the same thing when he told me Sal's heart medication wasn't working anymore. When something was wrong, Felix cleaned his glasses, like he needed to see it clearer before he could say it out loud. Dot, he said, low enough that the woman behind me couldn't hear. Come closer to the window." I leaned in, my hip pressing against the counter. The arthritis flared, that familiar knife twist in the joint, but I ignored it. "You get used to ignoring things at my age." "This isn't your regular Razodine," he whispered. "This is chlorpromazine. High dose. Who brought this prescription in?" I blinked. Chlorpromazine. I knew that drug like I knew my own hands. We used it in the hospital for patients with severe psychiatric episodes, the kind where they'd come in screaming, seeing things that weren't there, convinced the nurses were trying to poison them. In high doses, it doesn't just calm you down. It turns your brain into cotton candy. Confusion, memory loss, drowsiness so thick you can't fight your way out of it. I'd seen patients on that drug forget their own children's names, forget what year it was, forget how to use a fork. Felix slid the paper toward me, keeping his thumb over the patient name so anyone watching would think he was just explaining dosage. At the bottom, in small print, prescription called in by B. Mancini, daughter-in-law. Authorized caregiver. Authorized caregiver. I almost laughed right there in the pharmacy. Brooke couldn't keep a houseplant alive for more than 2 weeks. I'd watched 3 ferns and a succulent die slow deaths on her kitchen windowsill since I'd moved in. But sure, authorized caregiver. That was rich. "The prescribing doctor," Felix continued, his voice barely above a breath, "is not Dr. Okonkwo. It's someone from a clinic on the other side of town. A Dr. Huang. You ever see him?" I hadn't. I'd never even heard the name. Doctor. Okonkwo had been my neurologist for 8 years. She'd helped me through the migraines that started after Sal died, through the memory tests I'd insisted on taking when I turned 70, because I wanted to know for sure, one way or another. Every test came back normal. "Sharp as a tack," she'd said. "You'll be doing crosswords till you're 100. "Felix," I said, "give me my regular pills, the ones I always take, and give me these too. I'll take both bottles." He hesitated. He knew me well enough to know when I had a plan, even if he didn't know what it was. "Dot, you should report this. This is... I know exactly what this is." I put my hand over his, felt the bones beneath his thin skin, the tremor he'd developed last year. Parkinson's, early stage. He hadn't told many people, but I'd noticed. I always notice. I was reading prescriptions when your kids were still in diapers. Just trust me on this one. He filled both bottles, handed them to me in a white paper bag, the way he always did. Didn't charge me for the chlorpromazine. We'd settle up later, or we wouldn't. 43 years buys you a certain amount of credit. "Be careful," he said as I turned to leave. "I've been careful my whole life," I told him. "Look where it got me." When I got back to Kevin and Brooke's house, I still couldn't think of it as my home, even after 18 months. I went straight to my room and closed the door. The room they'd given me was at the back of the house, next to the laundry. I could hear the dryer running through the wall most nights, that rhythmic thump, thump, thump that was supposed to be white noise, but just reminded me that I was living in someone else's space. My hands were steady as I opened the chlorpromazine bottle and counted the pills. 30 of them. 30 little white tablets that were supposed to turn me into a drooling vegetable. I held one up to the light and examined it. Smooth, round, unremarkable. You'd never know what it could do just by looking at it. Most poisons are like that. I thought about confronting Brooke right then, marching into her home office, the one that used to be the guest room before she decided she needed a space for her creative projects, which, as far as I could tell, meant scrolling through Pinterest and ordering things online, and throwing those pills in her face. I imagined the look on her face, the sputtering denials, the crocodile tears. But here's what 35 years in a hospital teaches you. Never show your cards until you know what game you're playing. I'd seen too many families blow their advantage by confronting too early, by assuming they knew the whole story when they only had a corner of it. Patience wins. Patience and documentation. Instead, I found my old tea tin, the Earl Grey one with the dented lid that Sal bought me in London for our 20th anniversary. We'd saved for 2 years for that trip. Ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch every day to put money aside. And then we'd walked through London in the rain, holding hands like teenagers, and he'd spotted this tin in a shop window and said, "That's got your name on it, Dot." It was the color of rust and smelled like bergamot, and it was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever given me. Brooke hated that tin, said it clashed with the kitchen aesthetic, which was her way of saying it was old and didn't match her idea of how things should look. Every time I put it on the counter, she'd move it to the back of the highest shelf, behind the fancy French press she'd used exactly twice. She thought she was being subtle. She wasn't. Perfect hiding spot. I transferred my real pills into the tea tin and tucked it behind the French press. Then I put the chlorpromazine in my medicine organizer, the plastic one with the days of the week that Brooke had bought me, to help you keep track, Dolores. She'd presented it like a gift, like she was doing me a favor. The next morning, when she handed me my pills with a glass of water and that careful, watchful smile, I thanked her, took them to the bathroom, locked the door, flushed them down the toilet. I did this every day for a month, every single day, playing along with her little game while I gathered my pieces for a much bigger one. I should tell you how I ended up in that house in the first place. It's not a complicated story, just a sad one. The kind that happens to women my age more often than anyone wants to admit. The kind you read about in the newspaper and think, that poor woman, and then turn the page. 3 years after Sal died, I was still living in our house on Chestnut Street. The one we'd bought in 1987 with money we'd saved for 7 years, eating store-brand everything and taking our vacations at Sal's cousin's cabin upstate. No air conditioning, mosquitoes the size of your thumb, an outhouse that smelled like death in August. But it was free, and we were young, and we were building something together. I loved that house on Chestnut Street. Still do. The kitchen window looks out over the backyard where I grew tomatoes every summer. Big fat beefsteaks that Sal would slice thick and eat with salt and nothing else. Juice running down his chin. The bedroom closet still has his old cardigan hanging in the back because I can't bring myself to give it away. Navy blue, cable knit, worn through at the elbows. He wore it every Sunday morning while he read the paper. I can still smell him on it if I press my face close enough. But living alone at 70 gets complicated. The body doesn't cooperate the way it used to. The stairs get steeper every year. The jar lids get tighter. The nights get longer and quieter and harder to fill. Last spring, I slipped on some water I'd spilled while carrying a vase of flowers to the dining room. Lilacs, from the bush in the backyard that Sal planted when Kevin was born. Nothing dramatic. Just lost my footing. Went down hard on my hip. Couldn't get up. The pain was sharp at first, then settled into something deeper. Something that made me realize I wasn't getting off that floor without help. I lay there for 4 hours. 4 hours on the kitchen linoleum, staring at the ceiling, listening to the refrigerator hum. My phone was on the counter. Might as well have been on the moon. Finally, around 2 a.m., my neighbor Margie noticed the lights were still on. Margie's 78 and doesn't sleep much either. She knocked, then called, then used the spare key I'd given her 10 years ago for exactly this kind of emergency. Found me on the floor, cold and stiff and embarrassed as hell. I was fine. Bruised hip, bruised pride, nothing broken. But Kevin drove down the next morning with that worried look on his face. The same look he'd had at 9 years old when I told him the goldfish wasn't sleeping. And said, "Ma, this can't keep happening." "It happened once," I pointed out. "Once is enough. What if you'd hit your head? What if you'd been there all night? What if next time Margie doesn't notice the lights?" He went on like that for 20 minutes. And maybe I was tired. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe I just wanted to believe my son was worried about me and not about what the neighbors would think. So when he said, "Just come stay with us for a few months until you're back on your feet," I said yes. I rented the Chestnut Street house to a young couple, teachers from the local high school, nice people, quiet, said they loved the backyard. I packed 2 suitcases and let Kevin drive me to his split level in the suburbs, and I told myself it would be temporary. 18 months later, I was still there. The first few weeks weren't bad. Brooke was on her best behavior, cooking dinners I didn't ask for, offering to drive me to my appointments, asking about my day like she actually cared about the answer. Kevin seemed happy to have me around. Their daughter Piper, 14 and already too smart for her own good, would sit with me in the evenings and show me videos on her phone that I pretended to understand. Kids dancing, mostly, sometimes cats. But you know how it is when you're a guest in someone else's house. You start to shrink. You keep your voice down. You ask permission before you open the refrigerator. You notice the way your daughter-in-law's smile tightens when you leave a water glass on the counter instead of putting it directly in the dishwasher. Brooke had rules. She never called them rules. She called them how we do things, or just to make life easier. But they were rules all the same. I learned them one by one, the way you learn the patterns of a new workplace or a new neighborhood. My linen closet had to be organized by color, not because it made sense, but because Brooke had seen it done that way in a magazine and decided it was the only civilized approach. My bathroom had to be cleaned every other day, not because it was dirty, but because consistency is important. My phone calls to my friends had to be made with the door closed because we don't want to disturb Kevin's work calls. Never mind that. Kevin's office was on the other side of the house. Then there were the smaller rules, the unspoken ones that took longer to learn. Don't sit in Kevin's chair. Don't touch the thermostat. Don't use the good dishes. Don't comment on the food. Don't mention money. Don't bring up the past. And then there was the medicine cabinet. About 2 months after I moved in, Brooke suggested, in that helpful voice she uses when she's already made a decision, that we should move all my medications to the kitchen. "So we can keep track of them together, Dolores. Make sure you don't miss a dose." She put them in the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one I can't reach without a step stool. The one where she keeps the fancy olive oil and the imported pasta she uses twice a year. "I'll get them for you every morning," she said brightly. "That way you don't have to strain yourself." It sounds small, doesn't it? A cabinet, a step stool, but that's how it works. They take one thing, then another, and before you know it, you're asking permission to take your own pills. Asking permission to control what goes into your own body. I should have seen it coming. I'd watched it happen to patients' families 100 times during my nursing career. The slow takeover, the helpful suggestions that turn into requirements, the concerned questions that turn into accusations. "Are you sure you turned off the stove? Did you really take your medicine today? Don't you think you should sit down before you hurt yourself?" They call it helping. Sometimes it even starts as helping. But help has a way of curdling into control when you're not paying attention. Brooke had other ways of shrinking me, ways so subtle I didn't notice at first. She rearranged my spice cabinet, the small one in the corner of the kitchen that was supposed to be mine. I'd organized it by use: salt and pepper up front, Italian herbs next, baking spices in the back. The same system I'd used for 40 years, the one that let me cook without thinking, reaching for what I needed by muscle memory. One morning, I went to make toast and reached for the cinnamon. It wasn't there. Brooke had reorganized everything alphabetically: allspice, basil, bay leaves, cinnamon, all lined up like soldiers, all impossible for me to find without reading every label. "I thought it would be easier," she said when I asked. "More logical." I didn't argue. I just learned where the cinnamon was now and told myself it didn't matter. She threw away my tea kettle, the old copper one with the dent in the spout from when Kevin knocked it off the counter in 1995. Replaced it with a smart kettle that you had to control from your phone. "It's more efficient," she explained. "You can set it to boil from anywhere in the house." I spent 3 weeks trying to figure out how to use it before I gave up and started boiling water in a pot on the stove. Brooke would watch me do it with this little smile, like I'd just proved something about myself. She moved my crossword puzzle magazines to the garage. "They attract silverfish, Dolores? You wouldn't believe the pests these old papers bring in." I'd been doing crosswords every night for 30 years. It was how I wound down, how I kept my mind sharp, how I remembered that I was still capable of solving problems. But apparently crosswords brought silverfish, so now they lived in a cardboard box between the lawnmower and the Christmas decorations. Each thing on its own was nothing: a spice cabinet, a kettle, some magazines. But each thing was also a piece of me, moved or changed or thrown away, because Brooke knew better. Because Brooke was in charge. I don't know exactly when I started feeling like a stranger in my own life. It happened gradually, the way water wears down stone. One day you look up and realize you've been shaped into something unrecognizable, and you can't even remember what you looked like before. The doctor's appointments changed about 6 months in. Brooke started offering to drive me, which was genuinely helpful at first, since Kevin was always working, and the bus to Dr. Okonkwo's office took 45 minutes with a transfer downtown. But then she started walking me into the waiting room, then into the exam room. Then she started answering questions on my behalf. "Mom gets confused with medical terms," she told Dr. Okonkwo, smiling that smile. "It's easier if I help translate." Translate. As if I spoke a different language. As if I hadn't spent 35 years in hospitals, hadn't read more charts than she'd read magazines, hadn't used medical terminology when she was still in diapers. I let it go. The first time, I let it go. Picked my battles, kept the peace, told myself it was just Brooke being Brooke. But then it got worse. "She's been having memory problems," Brooke told the doctor on our next visit. "Repeating herself, forgetting conversations. I'm worried." I stared at her. I hadn't been having memory problems. I'd repeated one story about Sal's fishing trip, once at dinner, because Piper had asked about it, and Brooke had sighed loudly and said, "You told us this last month, Dolores." Maybe I had. Maybe I hadn't. But since when was telling a story twice a medical emergency? "Mrs. Mancini," Dr. Okonkwo said, turning to me with careful eyes. "Are you experiencing any cognitive difficulties? Trouble remembering names, dates, where you put things?" Before I could answer, Brooke jumped in. "She left the stove on last week, didn't you, Dolores? Tell her about the stove." I hadn't left the stove on. I'd put a kettle on to boil, walk to the mailbox, a 30-second trip down the driveway, and come back to find Brooke standing in the kitchen with her hand on her chest like she'd just witnessed a murder. "It was 3 minutes," I said. "I was getting the mail." Brooke's smile didn't waver. "She forgets how long she was gone," she told the doctor. This is what I mean. She doesn't realize. Dr. Okonkwo looked at me. Really looked the way she always had, like she was seeing past the surface to whatever was underneath. I wanted to tell her everything about the spice cabinet and the tea kettle and the pills in the high cabinet, about the way Brooke watched me like I was a bomb that might go off, about the creeping feeling that I was being erased, one small piece at a time. But Kevin had driven us there. Kevin was sitting in the waiting room, trusting his wife to take care of his mother. What was I supposed to say? That my daughter-in-law was trying to convince everyone I was crazy? Maybe I was crazy. That was the worst part. After months of Brooke questioning everything I did, I'd started questioning myself. Did I really leave the stove on? Did I really tell that story before? Did I really put my keys in the drawer? Or had I lost them again, like Brooke suggested? I'm fine, I told Dr. Okonkwo. I've always been a little forgetful. It's normal for my age. Brooke nodded, like I'd just proved her point. That night, I heard them talking. It was around 11. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom. At 71, you get used to those midnight trips, your bladder declaring independence from your sleeping schedule. And I heard voices from Kevin's home office downstairs. The door was open just a crack, a sliver of light cutting across the dark hallway. Brooke's voice floated up the stairs, clear as a bell. Doctor, Huang said early-stage cognitive decline is hard to catch, but if we document enough incidents, we can build a case. I've been writing everything down. The stove thing, how she repeats the same stories, how she loses track of conversations. Kevin mumbled something I couldn't make out. His voice was always softer than hers, always giving ground. Baby, I know it's hard. She's your mother, but my mom went through this with my grandmother, remember? It only gets worse. And if we don't get power of attorney now, while she can still technically consent. I stood there in the dark hallway, my bare feet cold on the hardwood floor, and felt something shift inside my chest, not my heart. I knew what heart problems felt like, had seen 1,000 of them, had held hands through the last beats of more hearts than I could count. This was something else, something heavier. Something that felt like the ground moving under my feet. Dr. Huang. The name on the prescription Felix had shown me. Brooke had already been to see him, had already been documenting my supposed decline, had already been planning this, whatever this was, while I sat in her guest room doing crossword puzzles and telling myself everything was fine. I went back to my room and didn't sleep until almost dawn. After Felix gave me those pills, I had a choice. I could confront Brooke immediately, make a scene, probably get accused of being paranoid and confused, which would only prove her point. Or I could play a different game entirely. 35 years in a cardiac unit taught me patience. You don't rush a diagnosis. You gather information. You watch and wait and take notes until you know exactly what you're dealing with. I'd seen doctors make snap judgments and kill patients. I'd seen nurses catch things that everyone else missed because they took the time to really look. So that's what I did. Every morning, Brooke handed me my pills with a glass of water. I smiled, thanked her, went to the bathroom, and flushed them. Then I retrieved my real medication from the Earl Grey tin and took it with a handful of water from the sink. My little secret, hiding in plain sight behind the French press that Brooke was too pretentious to actually use. Every evening, I pretended to be a little more tired than I actually was. Yawned at dinner. Let my sentences trail off mid-thought. Asked, "What was I saying?" once or twice when Brooke was within earshot. Forgot the name of the show we'd watched the night before. I was giving her what she wanted, a performance of decline. and she was eating it up like candy. "See?" I heard her tell Kevin one night. "She's getting worse." The doctor said this would happen. "Maybe we should talk to her actual doctor," Kevin said. "Not just, Dr. Okonkwo doesn't know what she's looking at. She's been seeing your mother for years. She's too close to it. Dr. Huang is a specialist. He knows the signs." Kevin didn't argue. He never argued with Brooke. That was his great weakness. He'd rather let things slide than fight for something, even if the something was his own mother. But I wasn't just performing. I was gathering evidence. I dug out my old nursing notebook from the bottom of my suitcase, the one I'd used to track patient vitals for 3 decades. Brown leather cover, yellow legal paper inside, coffee stain on the front from a night shift in 1994 when we'd lost 2 patients and I'd drunk so much coffee my hands shook for hours. I'd kept it all these years because it felt like part of me, like my career lived in those pages even after I'd retired. Now I started using it again. Different kind of vital signs this time. March 6th. Brooke called Dr. Huang's office at 10:15 a.m. On phone for 22 minutes, heard words evaluation and capacity. She was in the kitchen. I was in the living room pretending to read. March 9th. Found draft document in home printer. Title: Healthcare Proxy Designation. My name as principal. Brooke's name as agent. Not signed yet. Photographed with phone. Returned to printer tray. March 11th. Brooke asked me 3 times today what I had for breakfast. Wrote something in her phone after each answer. Building her case. March 14th. Kevin signed papers at kitchen table. Asked what they were. "Just boring work stuff, Dolores." Brooke gathered them quickly when I approached. Saw the words "power of attorney" at the top before she flipped them over. March 17th. Woman came to house. "Friend from work," Brooke said. Woman walked through every room, commented on good bones and natural light. Took photos. Realtor. I'd bet my pension on it. March 21st. Overheard Brooke on phone. The cognitive evaluation is scheduled for April 5th. Once we have that documentation, we can move forward with the rest. April 5th. 3 weeks away. That was my deadline. Piper saved me. I don't mean that dramatically. She didn't burst in and expose her mother or anything like that. But she gave me the tool I needed, and she did it knowing more than I realized. My granddaughter is 14 years old and already smarter than both her parents put together. She's got her grandfather's eyes, Sal's eyes, dark brown and always watching, and her grandmother's stubbornness, which she'd deny if you asked her. Brooke doesn't know what to do with her. Piper's too quiet, too observant, too unwilling to play along with whatever game Brooke is running at any given moment. Kevin just lets her be, which is probably the best thing he's ever done as a parent. A week after the pharmacy incident, Piper knocked on my door with a small cardboard box. "Grandma, I got a new phone for my birthday. Dad let me upgrade." She held up the box. "You can have my old one." I looked at the slim rectangle in her hands. Black screen, silver edges, sleek in a way that made me feel ancient. "Sweetheart, I don't know how to use these things. I can barely manage the TV remote." "I'll teach you." She sat down on my bed, patted the space beside her. "Come on, it's easy." For the next hour, she showed me everything. How to take photos and zoom in close. How to save them to something called the cloud, which sounded made up, but apparently was real. How to record voice memos. How to lock the screen with a passcode so no one could see what was on it without the code. She was patient in a way teenagers aren't supposed to be, repeating things without sighing, guiding my fingers without grabbing the phone away. When she was done, she looked at me with those Sal eyes, serious, direct, cutting through the nonsense, and said, very quietly, "Mom's been acting weird lately. Like, extra weird. She keeps asking Dad about lawyers and papers and stuff. And she's been making a lot of phone calls in the backyard where she thinks nobody can hear." I held the phone carefully, like the valuable thing it was. "What kind of papers?" "I don't know exactly, but she hides them when I come in the room, and she keeps looking at you like—" Piper trailed off, searching for the right words. "Like she's waiting for something. Children see things. Adults forget that. We think we're being subtle, keeping our secrets behind closed doors, speaking in code phrases and meaningful looks. But children are always listening, always watching. They know when something's wrong long before we're ready to admit it." "I'll be careful," I told her. She hugged me, quick and tight, the way she'd hugged me when she was little, before she decided she was too old for hugs, and slipped out of my room. That night, I practiced taking photos in the dark. Practiced being quick and quiet about it, just in case. By the third week, Brooke had stopped being careful. She'd been watching me like a hawk since the pharmacy trip, waiting for signs that the pills were working. And I'd given her plenty. The yawning, the trailing sentences, the manufactured confusion. She thought she was winning. She thought her plan was working exactly as expected. People get sloppy when they think they're winning. They stop covering their tracks. They start acting like they've already won. Brochures started appearing around the house, on the kitchen table, on the coffee table, tucked between the magazines in the living room. Glossy things with photos of silver-haired people playing shuffleboard or doing watercolors, looking deliriously happy about being warehoused in beige buildings. Sunrise Senior Living, where every day is golden. Maplewood Memory Care, dignity in every stage. Willow Creek Retirement Community, your new beginning. "Just researching options," Brooke said when I picked one up and looked at it. "For the future, you know. Planning ahead, it's smart to be prepared." The future. Like I was already gone and they were just waiting for my body to catch up with my supposed mind. Then came the realtor. The friend from work who'd walked through the house commenting on its bones came back with a measuring tape and a camera. This time she didn't bother with a cover story. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, she said into her phone, walking past me in the living room like I was part of the furniture. Original hardwood floors. Need refinishing, but good potential. Kitchen's dated, definitely needs updating. Nice lot size for the neighborhood. Good school district. I was sitting in the armchair, pretending to read a magazine. One of the home decorating ones Brooke left lying around to make herself feel sophisticated. I turned a page and listened. "What's the timeline looking like?" the realtor asked. Brooke glanced in my direction, quick, furtive, and lowered her voice. Not low enough. "A few more weeks. We're waiting on some medical documentation. But things should move fast after that. Medical documentation. The competency evaluation. The one that would declare me unfit to manage my own affairs, paving the way for Brooke to take over everything. My money, my house, my future. All wrapped up in legal language and stamped with authority, and me too drugged to argue about it. I turned another page and pretended I hadn't heard a word. The dark night came a few days later. I don't mean that figuratively. I mean there was a night, around 2 a.m., when I lay in bed in that guest room and seriously considered that I might be wrong about all of it. My hip ached. It always ached now. A constant low-grade reminder that I wasn't as young as I used to be. The house was quiet, except for the dryer running, that endless thump, thump, thump that had become the soundtrack of my life in this place. And my mind wouldn't stop churning. What if I was the crazy one? I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and ran through the evidence again. The pills, the forged prescriptions, the whispered conversations, the real estate evaluations. But what if I was wrong? What if there were explanations for all of it that I was too paranoid to see? Maybe Brooke was right. Maybe I was losing it. After all, normal people don't spy on their daughters-in-law. Normal people don't flush their pills and take secret ones from tea tins. Normal people don't spend their nights cataloging conversations in nursing notebooks like some kind of deranged detective. What if Dr. Huang was right and I was declining? What if the fall in my kitchen had done something to my brain that didn't show up on tests? What if I was building this whole conspiracy out of thin air, seeing patterns that weren't there? I got up and went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror. 71 years old, hair gray and thin, face lined and tired, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and weren't sure what to believe anymore. Maybe I should just sign the papers, let them take over, stop fighting something that maybe wasn't even real. And then I remembered the chlorpromazine, high-dose sedative. Not a treatment for memory loss. There was no memory loss to treat. A way to cause it. A way to make me confused, drowsy, unable to think straight or fight back or argue my case. You can't gaslight yourself into believing you're crazy when you're holding the pill bottle in your hands. The evidence wasn't in my imagination. It was in my medicine cabinet, labeled with my name and prescribed by a doctor I'd never met, called in by a daughter-in-law who wanted me out of the way. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't paranoia. That was a crime. And I was the only one who knew about it. I went back to bed. Didn't sleep much. But I stopped doubting myself. The next afternoon, I found what I'd been looking for. Brooke had gone to pick up Piper from swim practice. Kevin was in his office on a conference call that would last at least an hour. I'd learned his work rhythms by then, knew when he'd be distracted, and when he might wander out looking for coffee. I had maybe 45 minutes alone in the house. Her purse was on the kitchen chair, the leather one with the gold clasp that she'd bought herself for her birthday last year. She never let it out of her sight, carried it from room to room like it contained state secrets. But she'd been in a hurry, Piper texting that she was ready early, and she'd grabbed her keys and left the purse behind. I'm not proud of what I did next. My mother raised me better than to go through other people's things. She raised me to respect privacy, to keep my nose in my own business, to trust that people were generally decent until they proved otherwise. But my mother also raised me to survive. And sometimes survival means getting your hands dirty. The envelope was near the bottom, underneath her wallet and her makeup bag, and a little leather notebook I didn't have time to read. Cream-colored paper, heavyweight, the kind you use when you want something to look official. Return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. Henderson and Associates, with an address downtown. Inside, a draft of my last will and testament. I read it standing there in the kitchen, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My reading glasses had fogged up. I wiped them on my sweater and kept reading. The house on Chestnut Street, the one I'd rented out, thank God, instead of selling, went to Kevin and Brooke. Upon the death of Dolores Mancini, the property located at 47 Chestnut Street shall transfer in its entirety to Kevin and Brooke Mancini, to hold jointly with right of survivorship. My savings account, my pension, my small investment portfolio that Sal and I had built over 40 years of brown bag lunches and store brand groceries. All of it transferred to a trust for the benefit of Piper Mancini, with Brooke Mancini as sole trustee. The language made it sound generous, all for the granddaughter. But I'd seen enough estate planning to know what it meant. Brooke would control every penny until Piper turned 30. She could spend it on maintenance and care for me, which meant she could spend it however she wanted. And at the bottom, on the signature line, my name, in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but wasn't. I'd been signing my name the same way for 50 years. The loop on the D, the way I crossed my T's, the little flourish at the end of the I. This signature was close. Someone had practiced. But the loop was wrong. Too round, too careful. The work of someone copying, not someone writing from muscle memory. A forgery. Not even a very good one, if you knew what to look for. I photographed every page, front and back, close-ups of the signature, close-ups of the notary stamp, a UPS store on Bleecker Street, dated 3 weeks ago. The same place Piper said her mother had run an errand for work. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, positioned the purse exactly where it had been, and went to my room to wait. The dinner happened on a Thursday. Brooke had made meatloaf. My recipe, actually. The one from my mother that I'd kept in a little tin box on my kitchen counter for 40 years. Brooke had found it in a cookbook I'd accidentally left in the living room, and she'd started making it without ever once acknowledging where it came from, as if recipes just appeared in her head, as if she hadn't stolen it from the woman she was trying to rob. Kevin was home early for once, which was unusual. He'd been working late almost every night, hiding in his office, avoiding something he didn't want to face. I suspected he knew more than he let on, that he'd seen the papers, signed some things he shouldn't have signed, but hadn't let himself think too hard about what it all meant. Piper sat across from me, picking at her green beans, watching everyone with those careful eyes. She knew something was going to happen. I could tell by the way she sat, coiled like a spring, ready. Brooke poured wine for herself and Kevin. Water for me. "For your medication," she said, setting the glass by my plate. That smile. I took the glass, set it aside, didn't drink. "So, Dolores," she said, starting in on her meatloaf, "do you remember what we discussed last Tuesday about the insurance papers?" This was it. The trap she'd been setting for a month. She expected me to look confused, to ask what papers, to prove once and for all that I couldn't remember a conversation from 5 days ago. She expected the chlorpromazine to have done its work. I'd been waiting for this moment since the pharmacy, since the first pill went down the toilet, since I'd found her forged will in her overpriced purse and photographed every damning page. "You mean the papers where you listed yourself as my healthcare proxy without asking me?" The smile froze on her face. "The ones dated March 3rd, notarized at the UPS store on Bleecker Street because you thought I wouldn't check?" Kevin looked up. "Ma, what are you talking about? Or maybe you meant the other papers." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The draft of my new will, the one I never wrote, never signed, but somehow has my signature at the bottom. Nobody moved. The clock in the hallway kept ticking, the same clock that had been counting the seconds through every one of Brooke's schemes, every whispered phone call, every carefully laid trap. "She's confused," Brooke said. Her voice had gone high and tight, the way it did when she was scared. "Kevin, I told you. This is exactly what I was worried about. She's paranoid. She's making things up." "I'm not making anything up." I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out the phone Piper had given me. Set it on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. "Do you want to see?" I opened the Photos app and turned the screen toward Kevin. The first image. The prescription slip from Dr. Huang. Chlorpromazine. high-dose sedative. My name in Brooke's handwriting. "This is the medication your wife called in for me," I said. "Not my regular pills. A sedative strong enough to cause memory loss and confusion. I know because I spent 35 years as a cardiac nurse, and I've seen this drug turn sharp minds into mush." Kevin's face went pale. "That's not Brooke? She's lying." But Brooke's voice had lost its conviction. "She's confused, Kevin. The pills aren't working right. She's paranoid. The pills are still in the bottle." I swiped to the next photo. The chlorpromazine bottle, seal unbroken, 30 tablets still inside. Every single one. I've been flushing them down the toilet for a month and taking my real medication instead. I swiped again. The healthcare proxy. Then the forged will. Then the close-up of my signature. The wrong loop on the D visible even on the small screen. "The pharmacist kept copies of everything," I said. "Felix Delgado. You remember him, Kevin? He used to play poker with your father. He's been filling prescriptions in this town for 40 years, and he knows what fraud looks like." Kevin picked up the phone like it might bite him, scrolled through the images. His face went from white to gray to something that looked almost green. "Brooke," he said, "tell me this isn't what it looks like. She's manipulating you." Brooke's chair scraped back as she stood, the legs catching on the carpet. "This is what she does, Kevin. She plays the victim. She twists everything around." "The notary at the UPS store remembers you," I said. Calm, level. The voice I used to use with panicking family members in the ICU when someone was coding and everyone needed to stay focused. Middle-aged blonde woman, very particular about where the stamps went. Came in alone, said the papers were a surprise for her mother-in-law. Brooke's mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then Piper spoke. "Mom." Her voice was steady, older than 14. "I heard you on the phone with that lawyer 3 weeks ago. You were in the backyard, and my window was open. You said, 'Once she's in the facility, no one will listen to her anyway.'" The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Brooke looked at her daughter, at Kevin, at me. Her face cycled through expressions like a slot machine. Anger, fear, desperation, something that might have been shame if she'd known how to feel it. She looked like a woman watching her whole life unravel in slow motion, and for just a moment, just one moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I was trying to help," she whispered. "Kevin, you have to understand. Your mother, she's declining. I could see it happening. She's sharper than either of us." Kevin's voice was flat, dangerous in a way I'd never heard from him. "She caught you. She documented everything. She played you for a month, and you never suspected because you thought she was already gone. I was protecting our family. You were protecting yourself." He set the phone down carefully, like it might explode. "You were going to drug my mother, have her declared incompetent, forge her will, sell her house, put her in a facility where no one would believe her. And you did it right under my nose because you knew I was too distracted to pay attention." "Kevin," he stood up. His chair didn't scrape. It fell over, crashing against the floor with a sound that made us all jump. "I need you to leave this table. Right now." Brooke's mouth opened. For once, nothing came out. "We'll discuss this tomorrow. With lawyers. Tonight, I don't want to look at you." She left. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, quick, stumbling, nothing like her usual careful stride. And then the slam of their bedroom door. Then silence. Kevin stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, staring at the empty space where his wife had been. Then he sank back into his chair, rested his head in his hands, and made a sound I hadn't heard since he was 12 years old and his dog got hit by a car. Piper got up quietly, walked around the table, and put her hand on my arm. "I knew something was wrong," she said softly. "I just didn't know what. You helped me figure it out." I covered her hand with mine, felt the warmth of her young skin. "That phone you gave me, that was everything." Kevin looked up. His eyes were red, his face wet. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. "Ma," he said, "I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything tonight. I should have seen it. I should have. You trusted your wife. That's not a crime. The crime was what she did with that trust." He put his head in his hands again, sat there for a long time, not moving. Eventually, Piper went around and hugged him from behind, her thin arms wrapped around his shoulders, and he reached up and held on to her like she was the only thing keeping him from drowning. I watched them, my son and my granddaughter, broken open and raw and real in a way they hadn't been in years, and felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like a knot coming undone that I hadn't even known was there. The lawyers sorted out the details over the next 2 weeks. Turns out, forging someone's will and calling in fraudulent prescriptions are actual crimes. Who knew? The prosecutor used phrases like elder financial abuse and fraudulent impersonation and conspiracy to commit forgery. Brooke got a visit from the police, then a strongly worded letter, then something called a pre-indictment conference that her lawyer had to fly in from Albany for. She didn't go to jail. Part of me wishes she had, but mostly I just wanted her gone. Kevin filed for divorce 3 days after the dinner. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, which is the legal way of saying, my wife tried to steal my mother's life and I can't look at her anymore. He stayed with me for a while, at my house on Chestnut Street, the one I'd rented out. The one Brooke had been planning to sell. The young teachers had moved out the month before, transferred to a school closer to their families. Fate, maybe, or just good timing. Kevin slept on my couch like he used to do when he was 22 and between apartments, too proud to ask for help, but grateful when it showed up anyway. We didn't talk about Brooke much. What was there to say? She'd tried to destroy me, and she'd failed, and now she was someone else's problem. He was embarrassed, guilty, struggling to understand how he'd missed something so obvious, how he'd lived in the same house with it and never seen. I let him struggle. Sometimes the only way through shame is straight through the middle of it. You can't go around. Piper came to stay on weekends. She'd earned that. She'd been the only one in that house who bothered to pay attention. We'd sit in my kitchen together, her doing homework at the table, me doing crossword puzzles at the counter, the radio playing softly in the background. Comfortable silence. The kind you can only have with people who don't need you to be anything other than what you are. One Saturday afternoon, she looked up from her biology textbook and asked, "Grandma, weren't you scared? That whole month pretending to take those pills?" I set down my pencil. Thought about the question. Terrified, I admitted. Every single morning, I'd look at those pills in my hand and think, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm the crazy one after all? What if I go through all this trouble and it turns out she was just trying to help? But you didn't stop. No. Why not? I looked at her, 14 years old, Sal's eyes and my stubbornness, trying to make sense of a world that had just shown her something ugly about her own mother. Because fear doesn't mean you're wrong, I said. It just means you're paying attention. It's what you do with the fear that matters. You can let it freeze you, or you can let it sharpen you. I decided to let it sharpen me. She nodded slowly, turning that over in her head. Then she went back to her homework, and I went back to my crossword. And neither of us mentioned it again. The house on Chestnut Street looks the same as it always did. Maybe a little emptier now. The young couple who rented it took their things when they left, and I haven't replaced all the furniture yet. But it smells right. Feels right. The kitchen window still looks out over the backyard where I used to grow tomatoes, and Sal's cardigan still hangs in the bedroom closet, and the floors still creak in the same places they've always creaked. I'm home. Kevin comes by every Sunday for dinner. He's learning to cook. Badly, but he's trying. We eat overcooked pasta and underseasoned vegetables and pretend it's delicious. It's not about the food, it's about showing up. He's finally figured that out. Brooke sends emails sometimes. Long, rambling things about how I misunderstood her intentions and how she was acting out of love and how she never meant to hurt anyone. I delete them without reading past the first line. I don't need to know what she has to say. I know what she did. Felix still sets aside my prescriptions at the pharmacy. Same counter, same peppermint smell, same reading glasses on his forehead. He asks about Kevin. He asks about Piper. He doesn't ask about Brooke. The tea tin sits on my kitchen counter now, right at eye level, right where I can see it. Brooke would hate that. I kind of love it. Last week, Piper brought a friend over. Some girl from her swim team, shy, with braces and a ponytail, and a laugh that sounded like bells. They wanted to hang out with Grandma. Their words, not mine. I made them pasta, my mother's recipe, the one Brooke stole and never credited. They ate 3 helpings each and asked for more. The friend, Lily, her name was, asked if I'd always been this cool. I don't know about cool, I said. I've just been paying attention for a long time. You learn a few things. They helped me wash the dishes afterward, stood at my sink, soap suds up to their elbows, talking about boys and teachers and some drama with a group chat that I didn't understand. Normal teenage stuff. Silly, small, exactly the kind of thing that used to drive me crazy and now feels like music. When they left, Piper hugged me at the door. Tight, long, the kind of hug you give someone when you're grateful for them. Thanks, Grandma, she said. For what? For not giving up. I watched her walk to the car, her friend beside her, both of them laughing about something I couldn't hear. And I thought about all the ways this could have gone differently. If I'd taken those pills. If I hadn't known what chlorpromazine does. If Felix hadn't said something. If Piper hadn't given me that phone. If I'd believed them when they told me I was losing my mind. I'm 71 years old. I've buried a husband, raised a son, worked 35 years in a profession that shows you the worst and best of human nature in the same shift. I've made mistakes. I've trusted wrong people. I've let myself be pushed into corners by people who thought they knew better than me what my life should look like. But I'm still here. Still sharp. Still living in my own house, making my own decisions, taking my own pills from my own medicine cabinet that sits right at eye level where I can reach it without asking anyone's permission. That's worth something. That's worth everything, actually. If you're reading this, if any of it sounds familiar, if any of it makes your stomach hurt with recognition, I want you to know something. Trust yourself. Even when everyone around you is saying you're wrong, confused, paranoid, even when the people who are supposed to love you are telling you that you don't know what you're talking about. even when you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Your gut has kept you alive this long. It knows things your brain hasn't caught up to yet. Listen to it. And if someone's trying to convince you that you can't trust yourself, pay very close attention to why. Pay attention to what they gain if you stop believing in your own mind. You're not crazy. You're not paranoid. You're awake in a room full of people who wish you'd go to sleep. Don't sleep. Not yet. Not until you're good and ready. That's all I've got. Just the story of an old woman who learned the hard way that family doesn't always mean safety. That love doesn't always mean trust. That sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you have to watch the hardest. But I'm still here, still standing, and I'm not going anywhere until I decide it's time. If this story meant something to you, if any part of it felt true, I'd like to hear from you. Not because I need the validation. I'm past that. But because I spent a long time feeling like I was the only one who'd ever gone through something like this. Turns out I wasn't. Not even close. There are a lot of us out there. Women who've been pushed aside, talked over, medicated, dismissed. Women who've been told they're too old to know their own minds. Women who've had to fight their own families just to keep control of their own lives. If that's you, tell me. Leave a comment. Send a message. Let me know I'm not alone, and I'll let you know you're not either. We're stronger than they think we are, and we're a lot sharper than they'd like us to be. The spring after everything happened, I planted tomatoes again. First time in 3 years. The raised beds in the backyard had gone to weeds while I was at Kevin's place, and it took me 2 full weekends to clear them out. My back screamed at me the whole time. My knees threatened to quit. But I kept going, one handful of dirt at a time, because that's what you do when you're reclaiming something. Piper helped when she was over. She didn't know what she was doing. City kid, never had a garden, thought tomatoes grew on trees. But she learned fast. Got her hands dirty. Asked questions. Actually listened to the answers. "Why do you tie them to the stakes?" she asked once, watching me loop twine around a young plant. "Because they'll fall over if you don't. They grow faster than they can support themselves. You have to give them something to lean on until they're strong enough to stand." She thought about that for a minute. "Like people." "Yeah," I said. "Exactly like people." The tomatoes came in late that summer. Big, fat beefsteaks, just like Sal used to love. I sliced them thick and ate them with salt and nothing else, standing at the kitchen counter, juice running down my chin. I must have looked ridiculous. I didn't care. That's the thing about getting your life back. You stop caring what you look like to other people. You stop performing. You just live. Kevin's doing better now. The divorce took 8 months, which is fast for these things. Brooke fought for the house, their house, the split level in the suburbs. And she won, mostly because Kevin didn't want to fight anymore. He got joint custody of Piper, which is what he actually cared about. The house was just walls and mortgage payments. Piper was his kid. He bought a condo closer to town, small but clean. He's learning to take care of himself. Cooking, cleaning, laundry. Things he never had to do when Brooke was running his life for him. Things that most men his age never learn because there's always someone there to do it for them. We talked about it once, sitting on my back porch with beers neither of us really wanted. "I should have seen it," he said. "With Brooke. I should have known. You trusted her. That's not a character flaw. I let her handle things. That was the flaw." He picked at the label on his bottle. "I let her handle you." "You did?" He winced. "I don't know how to apologize for that, Ma." "You don't have to." I took a sip of my beer, warm, flat. But it wasn't really about the beer. You showed up when it mattered. You believed me when I finally told you. That counts for something. It doesn't feel like enough. It's what you've got. Work with it. He nodded. We sat there in silence for a while, watching the sun go down behind the trees. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was honest. Sometimes honest is all you can ask for. Brooke tried to contact me once more, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. She showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. I saw her through the window, standing on my porch in the same kind of outfit she always wore. Linen pants and a blazer, hair perfect, face composed, like she was showing up for a job interview. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, waited, knocked a third time. Then she called out, "Dolores, I know you're in there. I just want to talk." I stood in my hallway, 3 feet from the door, and said nothing. "Please," she said. "I need you to understand. I was trying to help. I was scared. You were getting worse, and no one was doing anything, and I thought, go away, Brooke." Silence on the other side of the door. "You don't have to forgive me. I know that. But I need you to know. I never wanted to hurt you. I was trying to protect the family. You were trying to protect yourself. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. You wanted my house, my money, and you didn't want to wait for me to die naturally. So you found a way to speed things up. That's not... The prescription was chlorpromazine, high-dose sedative. You called it in yourself. Don't tell me you didn't know what it would do." "Nothing. I spent 35 years watching families destroy each other over money," I said. "I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I'd never be surprised. But you surprised me, Brooke. You managed to be worse than anything I saw in the hospital." I heard her breathing on the other side of the door. Fast, ragged, the way people breathe when they're trying not to cry. "Go home," I said. "There's nothing for you here." She left. I watched through the window as she walked back to her car, got in, sat there for 5 minutes without moving. Then she drove away. She hasn't tried to contact me since. There's a photo on my mantle now. New, from last Thanksgiving. It's me, Kevin, and Piper, sitting at my dining room table with the good china that I only use for holidays. The tablecloth is red, not white, never white, and there's a turkey in the middle that Kevin somehow didn't ruin. We're all smiling, but not the fake kind. The real kind. The kind that happens when you're not thinking about what your face looks like. Piper took the photo on a timer. Ran back and forth 3 times trying to get in the frame before the camera went off. We're all laughing in the final version because she'd just tripped over the carpet and almost knocked over the gravy boat. It's not a perfect picture. The lighting's wrong, and Kevin's eyes are half closed, and you can see the mess in the kitchen behind us. But it's real. It's us. And every time I look at it, I remember that we made it through. That's worth something. That's worth everything. I don't know how much time I have left. That's not morbid. That's just honest. At 71, you start thinking about endings. You see friends get sick, get worse, get gone. You notice the way your body doesn't do what it used to. You start counting things differently, not in years, but in springs, in Christmases, in Sunday dinners with your son. But here's what I've learned. Time isn't the point. The point is what you do with whatever time you've got. For 18 months, I let someone else decide what my life looked like. I gave up control because it was easier, because I didn't want to cause trouble, because I thought trusting your family was what you were supposed to do. And I almost lost everything. Now I decide, every day, what I eat, what I wear, where I go, who I see, whether I take my pills, my real pills, from my own cabinet, whether I answer the door when someone knocks. That's freedom. Not the big dramatic kind you see in movies. The small, daily kind that nobody notices unless you've had it taken away. So that's my story. I was 71 years old, living in my son's spare room, letting my daughter-in-law manage my pills because I didn't want to make waves. And then I found out she was trying to drug me into incompetence so she could steal everything I'd spent my life building. I could have given up. I could have believed her when she said I was confused. I could have taken those pills and let myself fade into the fog she was trying to create. Instead, I flushed them down the toilet, took notes in a nursing notebook, and waited for my moment. It wasn't brave. It wasn't heroic. It was just survival. The same survival I'd practiced for 35 years in hospitals, watching people fight for their lives one heartbeat at a time. The difference was, this time I was the patient, and I wasn't going down without a fight. If you've read this far, if you're still here, I'm guessing you recognized something, a detail, a feeling, a moment that made your stomach hurt because you've been there too. Maybe you're in that place right now, sitting in someone else's house, taking pills you're not sure about, hearing whispers you can't quite make out, wondering if you're really as confused as everyone keeps telling you. You're not. Trust me. Trust yourself. And if you can't trust yourself yet, because they've done a good job of making you doubt, then start documenting. Start watching. Start paying attention to the gap between what they say and what they do. The truth is always there, even when people are trying to bury it. You just have to be willing to dig. And if you need to talk to someone who's been through it, someone who knows what it's like to be gaslit by your own family, I'm here. Leave a comment, reach out, tell me what's happening. You don't have to figure it out alone. None of us do. That's the one thing I wish I'd known 18 months ago when I moved into Kevin's spare room and started disappearing one piece at a time. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. You're just awake. Stay that way.
Dolores didn't just survive, she won. She moved out, took her money, and left Brooke with nothing but her dry meatloaf. Thanks for hanging out with me. You guys are amazing. You know, thinking about this, what Brooke did is actually a crime. Attempting to mess with someone's medication is next-level evil. Personally, I think Dolores was a saint for not putting her in jail right then and there. She chose to just walk away and live her best life, which is sometimes the biggest screw you possible. Do you think she should have been more aggressive, or was her quiet escape the right move? Hit that like button if you're on Team Dolores. See you in the next one.